Three babies sat in matching high chairs at the corner booth of a Brooklyn diner. They were 18 months old and they had never spoken a single word. Not dada, not no, not a sound. Doctors had run every test. Specialists from 4 different hospitals had examined them. The diagnosis was always the same. There was nothing physically wrong. The triplets simply refused to speak. Their father, the most feared man on the East Coast, had spent over $200,000 trying to find an answer. He had threatened surgeons, bribed neurologists, and once put a pediatrician against a wall because the man suggested the children might be emotionally stunted. But on that ordinary Sunday morning in November, with rain streaking down the diner windows and the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air, all 3 babies turned their heads at the exact same moment. They looked past their father. They looked past the 2-armed bodyguards pretending to read newspapers. They looked at the waitress carrying a tray of pancakes. And then the first triplet spoke. 1 syllable, clear as glass. Ma. The second triplet reached out both arms toward her and repeated it. Ma, ma. Then the third. The little girl. She smiled wider than she had ever smiled in her short life, pointed a tiny finger directly at the waitress, and said it loudest of all. Mama. The tray slipped from the waitress's hands. Pancakes hit the floor. Syrup splattered across the tile. And across the booth, the Mafia boss, a man who had buried his wife the same day these children were born, sat completely still. His coffee cup was suspended halfway to his lips. His hand was trembling, because those 3 babies had just chosen their mother, and what happened next would expose a corrupt judge, destroy a conspiracy that reached into the highest courtrooms in New York, and change the lives of everyone in that diner forever. Stay with me until the very end, because the truth behind why those triplets chose that waitress will shake you to your core. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories like this, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a new story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and smash that like button. It really helps the channel more than you know. Now let's get into it. Marcus Aurelio didn't look like a monster. That was the most dangerous thing about him. At 41, he had the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a magazine. Sharp jaw, olive skin, dark eyes that women found magnetic and men found terrifying. He wore a black cashmere overcoat over a charcoal turtleneck, no jewelry except a thin platinum wedding band he still hadn't taken off. He controlled 80% of the shipping corridors along the eastern seaboard. His legitimate businesses generated hundreds of millions annually. His illegitimate ones generated more. The FBI had a dedicated task force with his name on it, and they had never once made a charge stick. He was calculated, patient, and surgically precise in everything he did, except when it came to his children. 18 months ago, Marcus's wife, Valentina, went into premature labor at 32 weeks. The pregnancy had been complicated from the start. Triplets were rare, dangerous, and Valentina's body had been fighting against the odds for months. "I'll carry them," she had told Marcus, her hand on her enormous belly, her smile the only light in his dark world. "All 3, no matter what it cost me." It cost her everything. The emergency C-section saved the babies. 2 boys and a girl. Valentina bled out on the operating table 47 minutes later. Marcus was holding her hand when the monitors flatlined. He was told later that 4 orderlies had to physically restrain him because he refused to let go of her body. He named the triplets Luca, Nico, and Sarah. He hired the best nannies money could buy. He did everything right on paper. But the babies wouldn't speak. Their pediatrician called it selective mutism. The theory was that the absence of their mother's voice, the voice they had heard in the womb for 7 months, had created a silence inside them that nothing could fill. Marcus fired 3 nannies and 2 speech therapists. No one could fix them. And so, every Sunday without fail, Marcus brought his 3 silent babies to Rosie's Diner on Atlantic Avenue. No marble floors, no armed compounds, just cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox, and a waitress who had no idea who he was. Or at least that's what he believed. Grace Holloway had been working at Rosie's Diner for 11 months, and every single day felt like drowning in slow motion. She was 28, with auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun and green eyes that looked hollow from exhaustion. She worked the morning shift from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then picked up evening shifts at a laundromat 3 blocks away. On a good week, she made about $600, barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and the payments to a family lawyer who was slowly bleeding her dry. 2 years ago, Grace had been a pediatric nurse at Mount Sinai, Brooklyn, genuinely gifted with children. The other nurses called her the baby whisperer. She had a 4-year-old son named Noah and a life that felt secure. Then her ex-husband's family destroyed everything. Derek Pemberton was charming on the surface and vicious underneath. Grace left after he fractured her wrist. But Derek's father was Judge Richard Pemberton, a sitting family court judge with 30 years on the bench and connections deeper than subway tunnels. An anonymous complaint was filed at the hospital claiming Grace administered incorrect medication to a newborn. The attending physician blamed her, and the hospital sided with the doctor. Grace's nursing license was suspended. Her career was over. Now she served pancakes to strangers, counted her tips in the bathroom so no one would see her cry, and prayed every night that the judge assigned to her custody case wouldn't be another one of Richard Pemberton's friends. The hearing was in 9 days, and she was going to lose her son. She knew it. Her lawyer knew it. Everyone knew it except little Noah, who still asked every morning, "Is today the day I stay with you forever, Mommy?" But there was one thing in Grace's week that made the drowning stop, even if only for a few hours. Sundays. The man with the 3 babies. Grace didn't know his name. The other waitresses called him Mr. Sunday and fought over who didn't have to serve him because his bodyguards made them nervous. Grace volunteered the first week and never gave it up. It wasn't the man she cared about. It was the babies. 3 tiny faces with enormous dark eyes and jet black curls. Beautiful, but heartbreakingly still. That first Sunday, she'd leaned down to wipe cereal off one of the boys' cheeks and hummed a few bars of a lullaby without thinking. The song her mother used to sing, the one she now sang to Noah every night. All 3 babies turned toward her at the same time, and the little girl reached up and touched Grace's cheek. After that, a routine developed. Every Sunday, Grace would warm bottles, wipe faces, and lean in close to sing softly. And every Sunday, the triplets responded in ways they didn't respond to anyone else. Sarah grabbed her apron strings. Luca held eye contact. Nico pressed his forehead against her hand. The father noticed. His dark eyes tracked her every movement. But he never said anything beyond thank you, and always left a $100 tip on a $12 check. She went back because those 3 silent babies were the only beings in her life who needed her without condition, who reached for her without wanting something, who looked at her like she mattered. And when she was with them, even for just a few minutes, the weight of everything, the custody hearing, the lost career, the loneliness, lifted just enough for her to breathe. That morning, the morning everything changed. She walked up with a stack of pancakes and started humming the lullaby without even realizing it. That's when all three babies spoke for the first time in their lives, and the diner went dead silent. Marcus didn't move. The diner noise vanished. All he could hear was that melody. Three notes, 4, 5, a pattern so impossibly precise that his chest locked tight and the breath died in his throat. He knew that song. Valentina used to sing it every night, her hands on her belly, humming to the babies growing inside her. An old lullaby from her family in Calabria, passed grandmother to granddaughter for a century. She said the babies kicked hardest when she sang it, like they were dancing. After she died, Marcus couldn't bring himself to hum it, not once. And now a stranger in a Brooklyn diner was singing it, and his children were answering. Marcus looked at the waitress. He looked at his babies. All three were reaching toward her with their small arms outstretched, their faces bright with something he had never seen in them before. Joy, pure, uncomplicated, desperate joy. I'm sorry, Grace whispered, already on her knees picking up the scattered pancakes. I'm so sorry. I didn't teach them that. I would never... Stop! Marcus's voice was low, controlled, but there was a fracture underneath, a crack in concrete. How long have you been singing to them? A few weeks, I should have asked. They just seemed like they needed the song. Where did you learn it? My mother, Elena Reyes. She sang it to me every night when I was little. She said her grandmother taught it to her in Calabria, Marcus finished. Grace stared at him. The triplets had heard that melody through the walls of their mother's body. It was imprinted in them, in their cells, their memory, their earliest brain development. When Grace hummed those same notes, something ancient and primal woke up inside them. And they hadn't called her Mama because they were confused. They called her Mama because she sounded like home. What's your name? He asked. Grace. Sit down, Grace. I can't. My manager will... Sit. Down. It wasn't a request. Grace sat. My children haven't spoken in 18 months, Marcus said. Not to me. Not to the specialists I've flown in from 3 countries. Today they looked at you and said, Mama, so I need you to tell me, who are you? Grace looked at the 3 babies still reaching for her, and tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm nobody, she whispered. I'm just a waitress who's about to lose her son. And that single broken sentence changed everything. By that evening, Marcus's consigliere, James Ferrara, had a complete file on Grace Holloway sitting on his desk. Medical records, court filings, the bank statements that made James physically uncomfortable to read because no human being should have to survive on that little money in New York City. Marcus read every page. When he finished, he closed the folder and sat in silence for a long time. Tell me about the judge, Marcus said. Richard Pemberton, 31 years on the bench. His son Derek married Grace, divorced 4 years later. Derek has 2 DUIs and a sealed domestic violence complaint. The Pembertons filed for full custody, claiming Grace is financially unstable and professionally disgraced. The nursing license? It's the centerpiece. But boss, I pulled the hospital's internal records. The dosage error was real, but the prescription was written by Dr. Martin Hale. He wrote milligrams when he meant micrograms. Grace administered exactly what was prescribed. She did nothing wrong. And here's where it gets ugly. Hale's malpractice insurer is a subsidiary of Pemberton Holdings. The anonymous complaint came from a phone near Derek's apartment, And the hospital administrator who signed off on Grace's termination received a $50,000 wire transfer from the same holding company. Marcus stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Behind him, the baby monitor crackled with the soft sounds of his children sleeping. They manufactured evidence to take a mother's child, Marcus said. His voice was the kind of calm that preceded catastrophic storms. They destroyed her career and weaponized the system against a woman whose only crime was leaving a man who broke her wrist. When is the custody hearing? 8 days. Marcus turned from the window. His eyes were black ice. Not anymore, he said. Get me everything. Hale, the administrator, every case Pemberton has influenced, every dollar that moved through his hands that shouldn't have. And James. Find out where Grace's mother came from. Elena Reyes. I want to know how she ended up in New York. James nodded. He had worked for Marcus for 17 years and had seen the man order terrible things with less emotion. Whatever was happening, it was personal in a way James had never witnessed. And James was right to be concerned. Because when Marcus Aurelio took something personally, entire empires fell. Now this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Not even Marcus. 4 days later, on a Wednesday morning, Grace was halfway through her shift when the bell above Rosie's door jingled. She looked up. Her blood went cold. Derek Pemberton walked in. Leather jacket, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a lawyer in a gray suit carrying a manila folder. "Hey, Gracie," Derek said, loud enough for the whole diner. He slid into a booth. "Love what you've done with your career." Grace gripped the coffee pot tighter. "You can't be here, Derek." "It's a public restaurant." He looked her up and down. "You know, my dad was right. You really do look like someone who shouldn't be raising a child." The lawyer slid a document across the table. "Voluntary relinquishment form. Sign it and we skip the hearing." Grace stared at the paper. Her vision blurred. "Sign it, Gracie," Derek said, his voice dropping to that familiar poisonous softness. "You can't win. You know you can't. My father has friends on every bench in Brooklyn. Just let Noah come live with us. One you can visit on weekends. Maybe." The diner was silent. Every customer was watching. The other waitress, Maria, had frozen by the kitchen window. Carl Weston, the owner, leaned against the counter and watched like it was entertainment. And at the far end of the counter, in a dark jacket and a cap pulled low, Marcus Aurelio sat completely still. He had come to observe Grace. He hadn't expected to witness this. Grace set the coffee pot down slowly. Something shifted in her face. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something harder surfaced. Something that had survived a broken wrist, a destroyed career, and 11 months of counting tips in a bathroom. She picked up the document. Derek smiled. Grace tore it in half. Then she tore it again. She dropped the pieces on the table like confetti. "Noah is my son," Grace said. Her voice was shaking, but it carried across every table in the diner. "He is my heart and the only reason I get out of bed every morning. You broke my wrist. Your father broke my career. But you will not take my child. Not today. Not ever. Now get out of this diner before I call the police and file a harassment complaint that even your daddy can't make disappear." The diner erupted. An old man at table 2 started clapping. Derek's face went red. He stood up and leaned in close. "You're going to regret that," he whispered. "In 5 days, my father's friends are going to take your son, and there's not a single person on this earth who can stop it." He walked out. Grace stood trembling, tears falling. She turned toward the kitchen. That's when Carl Weston, the diner's owner, stepped in front of her. You just turned my diner into a courthouse, Holloway. You're done. Grab your things, you're fired. Grace's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Carl, the hearing is in 5 days. If I'm unemployed, they'll... Not my problem. You've been a liability since the day I hired you. Get out. Grace untied her apron. She walked out the side door, sat on the milk crate in the alley, and called her son. Hey, baby, I miss you too. Yes, we can have the dinosaur mac and cheese. I love you more than all the stars. Bye, my love. She hung up, pressed the phone to her forehead, and cried. Silent, shaking sobs. When she opened her eyes, Marcus Aurelio was standing at the end of the alley. I saw everything, he said quietly. How long were you? Long enough. He paused. What you did in there, at tearing that paper, that took more courage than most men I know have ever shown. Courage doesn't pay rent, Grace said, wiping her face. Courage doesn't win custody hearings. No, Marcus said, but I do. He sat down on the opposite crate. My name is Marcus Aurelio. The name hit her like ice water. She knew who he was. Everyone in Brooklyn knew. I know about Dr. Hale, Marcus said. I know about Pemberton Holdings. Every piece of evidence against you was manufactured to steal your child. Why do you care, Grace whispered. Because my children called you Mama. That's the first word they've ever spoken. I buried their mother the day they were born. I've spent 18 months trying to give them what she would have given them, and I failed. But you, a woman the world has chewed up and thrown away, you walked up to their table and woke them up with a song. I don't believe in coincidences, Grace. What do you believe in? Debts, and I owe you one that I intend to pay. Over the next 4 days, Marcus Aurelio took apart the Pemberton machine with the precision of a man who had been dismantling empires his entire life. Day 1, Dr. Martin Hale received a visit at his practice. 2 men presented him with copies of his original prescription and bank records linking his insurer to Pemberton Holdings. Sign a sworn affidavit admitting the error was yours, one said pleasantly, or these go to the medical board, the New York Times, and every malpractice attorney in the 5 boroughs. Hale's pen hit the paper before the man finished speaking. Day 2, hospital administrator Leonard Marsh found James Ferrara sitting behind his own desk, surrounded by printouts of 20 years of financial irregularities. The woman you destroyed for a $50,000 bribe is the only person who made Marcus Aurelio's children speak. Do you really want to find out what happens when you take something from him? Marsh wrote the retraction and resigned by noon. Day 3, a thick envelope arrived at the Judicial Conduct Commission containing documented evidence of 17 cases in which Judge Pemberton had communicated with attorneys outside court proceedings. 4 cases of concealed financial conflicts and the complete paper trail linking Grace's manufactured evidence to the Pemberton family. Identical copies went simultaneously to a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District and an investigative reporter at the New York Times. By sunset, Judge Richard Pemberton received a phone call suggesting immediate retirement. Day 4, Carl Weston arrived at Rosie's Diner to find a health inspector at the front door with a clipboard and a very particular interest in expired permits, temperature violations, and 3 years of wage theft against 7 employees. Carl tried to talk his way out of it. He failed. The diner was shut down for 48 hours. When it reopened, it had a new owner. The deed had been purchased through a holding company that Carl would never trace back to a penthouse on the Upper East Side. And on the morning of Day 5, the morning of the custody hearing, Grace Holloway walked into the Brooklyn courthouse expecting to fight the hardest battle of her life. Her lawyer, David Chen, was waiting in the hallway with a face she didn't recognize. He was smiling. "The Pemberton family withdrew their custody petition," David said. "All of it, voluntarily. Derek's attorney filed the motion an hour ago." Grace couldn't speak. "There's more. The nursing board received a sworn affidavit from Dr. Hale admitting the prescription error and a retraction from the hospital administrator. Your license suspension is being reviewed for immediate reinstatement." Grace's legs gave out. She pressed her back against the courthouse wall and slid down until she was sitting on the cold marble floor. She thought about the bag she had packed by Noah's bed, the letter she had written him, the one that started, "If Mommy can't be with you every day, I need you to know." A letter no mother should ever have to write, and now she would never have to send it. "How?" she breathed. "Someone out there," David said, "has very long arms and very sharp teeth." Grace knew exactly who it was. 2 weeks later, Grace Holloway walked into Marcus Aurelio's penthouse on the Upper East Side for the first time. She had been invited, or genuinely invited, to bring Noah and spend the afternoon with the triplets. Marcus's text had said, "The babies won't stop looking at the door on Sundays. I think they're waiting for you." The penthouse was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, art on the walls worth more than Grace would earn in 10 lifetimes. But the nursery was the warmest room she had ever been in. Soft light, thick carpet, 3 cribs in a semicircle with matching mobiles that played a gentle instrumental version of the lullaby. Grace stopped in the doorway when she heard it. "You found the song," she whispered. Marcus stood near the window, holding Sarah on his hip. He looked different here. Softer, younger, less like a weapon and more like a father. "I had it arranged," he said. "Flew in a musician from Calabria who knew the traditional melody. They sleep through the night now. First time since they were born." Grace pressed her hand against her mouth. Noah tugged at her jeans. "Mommy, are those the babies you told me about?" "Yes, sweetheart." Noah walked over with the fearless confidence of a 4-year-old and sat down on the carpet in front of them. Luca handed him a stuffed giraffe. Nico touched his curly hair with curious fingers, and Sarah crawled into Noah's lap, looked up at him, and said a new word. "Bubba." "Brother," Grace translated, laughing through tears. Marcus watched the 4 children on the floor. Then he turned to Grace. "I need to tell you something about your mother," he said. "Elena Reyes came to New York from a town outside Catanzaro in 1989. She worked as a seamstress in my mother's dress shop in Bensonhurst for 6 years. When Elena got sick, my mother paid her medical bills anonymously. The lullaby, your mother learned it from my mother. My mother taught it to Valentina. And Valentina sang it to the triplets every single day of her pregnancy." Grace sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Her hand was trembling. "They didn't choose a stranger," she whispered. "No," Marcus said. "They chose family." The room went quiet except for the sound of 4 children playing on the carpet. "I'm offering you a position," Marcus said. "The triplets need someone they trust. Full salary, full benefits, your license reinstated within the month. Noah in the best school in Manhattan, and you will never, ever have to worry about a man like Carl or Derek or anyone else making you feel small again." "Marcus, my wife asked me to promise, before she went into surgery, that I would make sure the babies knew what love sounded like. I failed that promise for 18 months. You kept it without even knowing it existed." Grace wiped her eyes. She looked at the triplets. Luca stacking blocks with Noah, Nico chewing on a toy, Sarah still nestled in Noah's lap. Yes, Grace said. Yes. Yes, not for the salary, not for the school, because those three babies called me mama. And in this world, when a child chooses you, you don't walk away. You show up every single day. You show up. Marcus nodded. He looked at the wedding band on his finger. Slowly he twisted it, not removing it, just loosening its grip, as if giving himself permission to feel something new without betraying something old. And from the floor, Sarah lifted her head from Noah's lap. She looked at Marcus first, then she looked at Grace. Then she crawled across the carpet with purpose, pulled herself up using Grace's jeans, and lifted both arms. Con mama, Sarah said, clear, certain, choosing. Grace picked her up. She held the little girl against her chest, and Sarah's tiny hand found Grace's heartbeat and rested there. And Marcus Aurelio, the most feared man on the East Coast, watched the woman his children had chosen hold his daughter the way Valentina used to hold her. He dropped to his knees, not because he was broken, because he was finally ready to heal. And Grace began to hum, the same melody, the same lullaby, the song that had traveled from a village in Calabria through two families across an ocean, through a mother's body, into the memory of three babies who refused to speak until they heard it again. Luca stopped playing. He looked up. Nico stopped chewing. He looked up. And Sarah, against Grace's chest, closed her eyes and smiled. The silence was gone. The house was full of music. And that is the story of how three silent babies chose their mother in a Brooklyn diner. I have to ask you, if you were Grace, would you have accepted Marcus's offer? Or would you have walked away from the most dangerous man in New York? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story gave you chills, do me a favor. Smash that like button. It tells the algorithm to share stories like this with more people who need to hear them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join the family so you never miss another story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.